The crate weighed what an empty crate weighs, and that was the first thing wrong with the job. Dez Calloway had moved enough freight in the dock's shadow of enough reach orbitals to know the heft of money. Stolen components rode heavy, smuggled people rode warm, falsified paper rode like nothing at all. This rode like nothing at all, and the client had paid like it was the heaviest thing in the sector. Worse than that, the client did not want it carried out of anywhere. The client wanted it carried in. 2 days earlier, the job had looked like the easiest pay Dez had ever turned down, and then not turned down. It came in the way good jobs came in. Sideways through a fence Dez had moved a dozen quiet lots for. A heavy-set woman named No Relation, who ran components out of a rented bay on the unwatched side of a frontier transit ring. The client was a voice on a leased channel, careful, unhurried, paying through a string of cash in barter cutouts so clean that following it back would have taken a reach audit team a year and a warrant they would never get. That was a tell, but the right kind. People who paid like that paid because they could afford to, and people who could afford to mostly did not stiff a fixer over a percentage. Dez worked the gray, not the criminal of children's stories, no big bad, no syndicate, just the layer underneath the licensed market, where the components people needed now moved without a sole broker's lead time and a contractor's whole margin. Dez had no license worth the polymer it was printed on. One lapsed, kept for the look. What Dez had was a reputation, worn up the right ear in a row of small machined rings, one per det settled clean, where a handshake could see it. In a layer with no cord and no boss, the rings were the only thing that was actually load-bearing. The bay smelled like every frontier bay, hot metal, cold coolant, the Swedish reek of a CO2 scrubber a week past its swap. Dez sat on a salvage crate that was not the salvage crate and listened to No Relation explain the terms in the careful understatement of the trade.
Client's got a package, wants it placed. Not sold, not fenced, placed. Specific spot, specific window, and they want a confirmation it landed.
Placed where?
That's the part I'm getting paid not to write down. Coordinates come with the package. You'll want to sit down when you read them.
Dez had heard you'll want to sit down attached to a lot of jobs. Usually it meant the coordinates were inside a checkpoint, or a Sewell recovery zone, or somebody's living room. Dez took a percentage to make problems like that into smaller problems. The working debt back home, the one that made a too good job hard to walk away from, did the rest of the arguing. Dez took the coordinates, then Dez sat down. The coordinates were a place the charts left blank. Not blank the way a checkpoint is blank, redacted, withheld, a hole someone cut on purpose, blank the way the deep frontier is blank, where the survey passes had gone quiet and the line just stopped. Dez had run cargo past the edges of 2 of these in a career. Every smuggler had. You learned them young, the way you learned which licensing officer was paying off which debt this quarter. The blank places are not on the routes. The inherited gear goes strange near them. You do not fly into them. And nobody who works the dock shadow has to be told twice. The Vask had a name for them that did not cross to compact standard. The crews Dez ran with called them the quiet, or the kept places, or the ones who had been near one. They did not call them anything. They just went around. The network went around too. Everybody knew that. The buoy chains dog-legged on their own behavior. The reach charts marked the region's no relay and left it there. This package was meant to go in. Dez sat with it for a while, the way you sit with a thing you have already been paid half for. A fixer's whole craft is sorting the rules that bite from the rules that are only written down. Most of what the trade fears is paperwork. A checkpoint you can time, a seal you can fake, an officer you can find the debt of. Dez made a living on the gap between what the rules said and what the rules did, but the kept places were not a rule somebody wrote. They were a rule the inherited gear obeyed without being told, older than the accord, older than the charts, and a fixer who could not tell those 2 kinds of rule apart did not get old. So Dez did the thing the client was paying for Dez not to do, which was think about it. You drop cargo to deliver it. Somebody is on the other end to take it. But there was no other end here. There was nothing on the far side of that boundary to receive a thing, Not a buyer, not a hold, not a hand. The client did not want the package placed. The client wanted it gone into the one address in the sector that returns nothing, and was paying a fixer's premium to have a third party's name on the doing of it. It was not a delivery, it was a disposal, and the price said the client knew exactly what kind of address they had bought. Here was the problem with a disposal you have been paid for. The client wanted a confirmation. Pell No Relation had said it like it was nothing. They want a confirmation it landed. And on a normal job, a confirmation was nothing. A log doc stamp, a photo of a seal, a code word on a leased channel. But you could not stamp a kept place. You could not raise a channel anywhere near one. The inherited gear ate the handshake and gave back a door with no one behind it. The client knew that too. So the client had specified the one signal a kept place would carry. A keep alive. Dez had to go ask about that because Dez did not tend buoys, and the only people who really understood the housekeeping layer of the inherited comms gear were relay tenders and the kind of frontier folklore that smugglers traded around a galley table. Dez went to the folklore. There was a crew Dez had moved parts for, a vast human two-hander who ran the thin dead zone edge routes, and over a bad pot of something hot, the human half told the story the way it got told now, a few orbitals out from where it happened.
There's a tender out on one of the 9 chains, a few years back. Fast runner gets pulled into the quiet. Drive throws a nav fix too close. The quiet takes the handshake. Ship safes itself and starts to fall in. Dead, right? You can't raise anybody in there. Channel's gone the second you cross the line.
But
the tender doesn't use a channel. Takes the buoy's keep alive. The dumb little heartbeat. The I'm here it beats out a few times a minute and starts stuttering the gaps. Long, short, long. Oldest code there is. And the quiet carries it, because the heartbeat isn't a channel, it's plumbing, and the quiet doesn't gate plumbing. Counts that runner out by hand. Cooked a buoy doing it, but the kid lived.
Dez turned that over. The Vask half of the crew had not said a word the whole telling, but at the end the Vask set down the cup and said the only thing that mattered.
The heartbeat crossed. The runner did not, until a human pulled them out. Nothing crosses on its own. The quiet keeps what enters it.
The quiet keeps what enters it. That was the thing the whole trade knew in its spine and never said out loud, because there was no profit in saying it. You could not get a thing back out of a kept place. Not a ship, not a signal on its own legs, not a hand. The relay tenders knew it as physics. The Vask knew it as a caution older than their grief. The crews knew it as the reason you did not have to be told twice. Nothing the trade had ever sent across that line had come back to be sold. It was the one address in the sector that was final, which was exactly why somebody would pay a fortune to use it. Dez had spent enough years reading what people paid for to read what this client was buying. Not a delivery, an oubliette, a hole that keeps what you put in it and gives nothing back and cannot be subpoenaed, because the inherited gear that keeps it does not answer to a court and does not answer at all. The client had a thing they needed to be more than destroyed. They needed it unrecoverable, past any salvage, any audit, any clever human with an uncertified diagnostic unit and time, and they had found the only address that offered that, and they were paying a third party to be the name on the doing of it. It was good craft from the client's side. It was the kind of thing Dez might have admired in someone else. The confirmation signal was the clever part. You stutter the package's beacon into a keep-alive telegraph as it crosses. The kept place carries the I'm here out the way it carried that runner's distress beacon out. And the client sits 2 sectors away and watches a heartbeat go in and stutter and stop. Placed, confirmed by the one signal that crosses and the silence that follows. Nothing comes back, and that is the receipt. Dez sat with the receipt for a long time. There was a thing under all of it that would not lie down. Dez moved what the licensed market wouldn't and felt fine about it. Stolen cores, off-book salvage, paper that read right to a bureaucrat skimming fast. The line was private and absolute, and Dez would have denied having one. But the line was this: you do not feed a thing to the silence for a client who pays that much to be rid of it without first knowing what the thing is. Because a thing somebody pays a fortune to lose is worth more held than delivered. That was not conscience. That was the oldest rule in the trade, the one that made the rings. You find out what you are actually carrying. So Dez tried. The package had a seal Dez did not break. Breaking it was a different kind of line, and a fixer who opened a client's freight on a whim was a fixer nobody trusted twice. But Dez did not have to open it to read it. The uncertified diagnostic unit, the one off a scrap dealer that read what the licensed tools politely didn't, came out of the coat and went flat against the crate's side, and Dez sat in the dark of the cockpit and watched the thing refuse to be a category. It was inheritance built. That much the unit was sure of. The old patina deep signature, ornament with no current meaning, a thing made by something no longer here. But it was not a core, and it was not a stasis unit, and it was not a relay, and it was not anything the unit had a profile for. It drew almost nothing. It ran cold, and under the housekeeping layer the client had told Dez to modulate, the dumb little heartbeat every inherited component beats, the unit caught a second thing it could not name, fainter than the heartbeat, slower, and lost it in the noise before it could resolve. Dez sat with that too, a component that big a fortune wanted gone, that no fence had a catalog line for. You could not read it. You could not price it. You could only hold it and find out later, or feed it to the silence and never find out at all. The trade had a word for a thing you can't price and can't return. A problem. The trade had a word for a problem somebody else paid a fortune to make disappear. An opportunity if you lived to spend it. So Dez decided to cheat the client. Not to refuse. Refusal left the package in the client's hands, and the half-pay owed back and the working debt unpaid, and a careful, wealthy, patient enemy who now knew Dez's face, and not to deliver. Delivery fed the thing to the silence forever, unread. Dez decided on the third door, the fixer's door. Do the job the client could see, and not the job the client bought. Fake the drop. The con built itself once Dez saw it. The client could not watch the package cross. Nobody could see into a kept place. That was the whole point. The client could only watch the signal, so Dez did not need to put the package across the line. Dez needed to put a keep-alive telegraph across the line that looked exactly like the package crossing. The stutter the client specified, the go-in, the silence after. And the client, 2 sectors out, would read the heartbeat and the silence and stamp the job done. It meant building a falsified, keep-alive telegraph. The folklore trick, run backward and dishonest, not to save a life across the boundary, but to forge a death across it. Dez had the package's beacon. It had come with a housekeeping pulse. A dumb little "I'm here" the client had told Dez to modulate. Dez could copy that pulse onto a throwaway. A dead component, a brick of scrap with a salvaged beacon married to it, the kind of decoy any fence kept around. Send the decoy across the line beating the package's heartbeat, stuttered to the client's spec. The kept place would carry the telegraph out, the way it carried plumbing out, right up until the decoy crossed deep enough that even the heartbeat stopped, placed, and the package, the real one, the heavy, weightless thing somebody wanted gone, would ride home in Dez's coat. The decoy would go in and not come back. That part was not faked. That part the kept place did for free. There was one more thing, and it came from the smuggler crew on the way out. The human half catching Dez at the lock with the low, careful voice of someone passing along a thing worth more than the parts Dez had moved.
Word of advice, since you're asking about the quiet. You're not the only one interested. There's a combine. The big industrial outfit, drones and templates, clears a wreck like ore. Been buying charts. Quiet charts. Mapping where the rich, strange wrecks cluster, and they cluster on the blank spots. They've got a map of the kept places, and they're working toward the edges of them for the salvage.
Corporates charting the quiet.
From the outside. for money. And now somebody's paying you to drop something inside one. Two different kinds of people, real interested in the same nothing, coming at it from opposite sides.
Dez filed that the way Dez filed everything that was bigger than the job, in a flat, hidden pocket for later, where it could not weigh on the work. Two kinds of people circling the same silence. The combine wanted what the silence was near. The client wanted what the silence would take. Dez wanted to get paid and keep the thing the client wanted to lose, and get clear before either kind of attention turned a face into a problem. Dez ran the route out alone. The boundary did not look like anything. That was the worst of it. Dez held the ship a careful margin off the line, drives warm, nav fixing on the buoy chain well behind, never throwing a handshake forward. You did not throw a handshake at the quiet. The quiet took handshakes, and a drive with its fix eaten safed itself and fell in. Ahead the stars just stopped. A wedge of dark deeper than dark, giving back no edge, no reference, no reflection. Thin dust haze marking exactly where the dark began, where the drifting grit of the deep frontier simply ceased. Dez felt the pull. Not a force, a wrongness. The instruments leaning, the long-trained animal under the skin saying, "Go around." Dez did the work fast and by hand. Loaded the decoy into the launch cradle. Confirmed the salvaged beacon was beating the package's heartbeat. Stuttered to the client's long, short, long spec. Set the throw shallow and true. A dead brick on a ballistic toss across the line. No drive, nothing the quiet could safe and pull early. Just mass going in, the way the client believed the package was going in. Sent it. The decoy crossed the haze and the dark took it without a sound, and the heartbeat carried out. I'm here, stuttered long, short, long, the keep alive crossing the way the keep alive always crossed, the one signal the quiet did not gate. Dez relayed it clean down the chain to the least channel where, 2 sectors away, a careful, wealthy client watched a pulse go in, and stutter, and weaken, and, as the brick fell deeper than even a heartbeat could climb back from, stop. Silence after, the receipt. The confirmation code came back down the channel a minute later, cold, unhurried, satisfied, placed. The real package wrote in the code against Dez's ribs, weighing what an empty crate weighs, weighing a fortune. Nothing came back out of the dark. Not the decoy, not its heartbeat, not one mote of the grit that crossed with it. Dez had cheated the client by building the forgery. But the thing that made the forgery work, the going in and never out, that part the quiet had done for free. Exactly the way it did everything, the way it had done it longer than anyone alive could count. Dez had used the silence honestly to tell a dishonest truth. The job the client could see was done. The job the client bought had not happened at all. Dez turned the ship and ran for the chain and did not look at the dark again. Pell no relation paid out the back half in cash and barter through the same clean cutouts, and the working debt back home got smaller, and the row up Dez's right ear was due a new ring for a job closed clean. Closed clean by the rules that bite anyway. By the rules that are only written down, Dez had just stolen something from a person careful and patient enough to launder a fortune through cutouts a reach audit team couldn't unpick. The client thought the package was at the bottom of the only address in the sector you can't subpoena. The client was wrong and would stay wrong right up until they weren't. There was no version of cheating a client like that where it stayed free. Dez had not gotten a clean win. Dez had gotten a held breath and a thing in the coat that somebody had paid a fortune to make disappear, and a quiet certainty that the bill for both was somewhere out in the dark, taking its time. So Dez did the thing the whole job had been about not doing. In the dark of the cockpit, chain lights crawling past the viewport, Dez set the package on one knee and opened it. An inch. Just enough. Inside was an inherited component Dez had no category for. Not a core, not a stasis unit, not a relay. Nothing in any fence's catalog or any rule Dez had ever learned to read. Old. Older than the gear it didn't resemble. And under the dumb housekeeping heartbeat the client had told Dez to modulate, Under the I'm here, there was something else. A pulse, faint, slow, perfectly, patiently regular. It was keeping time.